Now we got it. Way too bright. Right. All right. Hi, Mike. There's everybody. You guys hear me? Perfect.
Good.
All righty. We're gonna open up the chat.
Natalie.
Scott, nice to see you.
Oh, Paul, good to see you.
All right.
Doles.
We got Aaron and the. All right.
Hey, there's Gus and
Drinking
Cindy.
Syrah. I love it. Who all has Syrah? Here we go. Yes. Nice. This is perfect. Love. Oh, we got some train station. We've got everybody muted. So if you want to talk, you have to hit the
raise your hand.
space bar. Raise your hand. I can.
There's a few more people checking in.
Yeah, we still have people checking in. And we've got, hold on one second. All right, let me see all the participants in here. Everybody, big old cheers. Happy Wednesday. Super fun. Okay. I should have some more people checking in pretty soon, I think. Here,
Tony.
there we go. There's Tony.
Hey,
nice
Tony.
to see you.
Oh.
And Gus got the beard going there. Scott's got his Syrah. Love it, love it. So, well, welcome to Wednesday, you guys. Welcome to Happy Hour. Does everybody love the Syrah? Yes, love that. That's fantastic. So for those of you guys who haven't joined us before, the remember over on the side at the bottom, there's the chat. If you type things, if I have everybody unmuted, it gets messy. So if you type things in the chat, we can unmute you when people have things to say. Rebecca, turn on your, I don't know who Joe Exotic is. Becky, turn on your video. We want to see your food, your face. There you go. Thank you.
You can also raise your hand, right?
Yeah. So if you want to say something, there's a raise your hand button. And here we go. This will be fun. So 5:05. Should we give people another couple minutes to show up or just start drinking?
Well, we can drink. She just doesn't have to talk. Well, there you go.
So, all right, since everybody's got the Syrah, real quick, I wanted to go to the part of the vineyard that has, yes. Oh, yes, I can see you, Rebecca. There was another one that I couldn't see, and then I can see everybody now. So we're all good. Good job, Ed.
Kevin.
Ed started drinking before the video began. Yeah, we're waiting for Kevin, and we can't see you yet. And then, so quick show of hands, how many people make meatballs? Ta-da-ta-da!
Good.
This is so fun. I'm proud of you guys. This is awesome. Eating and drinking all the same thing virtually is amazing. Okay, so since almost everybody has Syrah, and we're talking about Syrah, what I wanted to do is show you guys where the Syrah. Barb, what are you drinking? Hold on, let me unmute you. Are you doing rosé or are you doing Syrah?
We're doing both.
Yes, that's a good answer. Love it.
Okay.
Well, I got Kylie with me. She's home.
All
Good,
right.
hey.
So since last week Barb was drinking Syrah during the rosé session, she was debating which way to go. Oh, there's Milo, which means, and Dad showed up. Everybody say hi to Dad. So now that we've got most of the crew, I think, I'm going to take us all in the vineyard over to the Bill, you're right. We should all have been drinking by now. I'm going to take us over to the vineyard, the picture we looked at last week. This one. And so last week when we did the rosé, remember those rows were down here in the Cab Franc. And so we've got the carriage house block in this part of the vineyard. And then the coat comes from these two. The Riesling that we enjoyed a couple weeks ago is up here at the top of the hill. And then over here, we've got the Syrah. Chardonnay, and thanks, Mom. Yeah. She's always correcting me. Kylie, did your mom do this to you? So then we're going to zoom into that part of the vineyard, to that block, and look at, there's a Drish. Adrish, we want to see your food in a minute, because I know you made lamb as well.
That's him.
Hold on. No, it's not. And then we're going to go over here. So this part, you can see on the left hand of the screen, this is where that Cabernet comes up. And one of the things that's really cool about De Brule Vineyard, and it's kind of indicative of throughout the Yakima Valley, but it's really unique that we have these, because we have these east-west running hillsides and we have this basalt promontory, when we have all these different aspects and elevations. So the vineyard is like, it's like an upthrust, like a hand. And so this part right here, which is facing west, so that the Cabernet goes south that we were looking at. And then this right here is the Chardonnay. So this is south facing, but here's where it curves back and it's north facing and it's cooler. So the Chard is here. And then the Syrah is over here and it's a little more intermediate. So it doesn't get as much heat as the Cabernet planting. It gets more heat than the Chardonnay planting. So it's part of what makes all of these varietals grow so well in one spot, is that they all have their little microclimates and they all have the variation. I mean, we all know from working in the garden or just looking at that patch of grass that doesn't grow as well because it gets more sun or less sun. Like, all these things matter, but it matters that much more when you're trying to do something at a very high quality level like we are.
This is interesting too, because you can see Mount Rainier and Mount Adams.
This one's Rainier, this one's Adams.
And so that's the Cascade Mountain Range, which is of course where we get our water for the growing season, comes in the form of snow. We are a desert, as we've said. We only get about 7 to 10 inches a year of all precipitation. So we rely on the snowpack during the winter, and you can see the canal systems that are through the valley that bring us our water to our properties that we irrigate with.
Yeah, and you can see from this, in this spot, that the Syrah's right here, and right across the road there's that sagebrush. So this part's irrigated and this part isn't. And that's pretty dramatic and unique globally, because most growing regions aren't this dry. They don't give us that much ability to control how the vines grow and hold water back when it should be, and give some water when the vines need the water. So so that's kind of why Syrah is in that spot, why we grow Syrah, why we make Syrah is because we love it, because we do. And then so then the next question that we keep getting asked is what's going on in the vineyard right now? And unfortunately, we haven't had much to say the last couple of weeks because the vines were in dormancy. There wasn't a lot going on. They'd been pruned, but they were waiting for, we were kind of waiting for things to start happening again. And luckily, this week, things are happening because we have, I will show you, this one. So we've got the water turned on, we're getting water back in the soils, and it's there. We talk about sap flow. So what happens when the soil temperature gets to a certain level, it really is very temperature dependent, this process. And the vines will start to wake up, they start pulling water out of the soil and it comes up through the plant. And we go through and we prune and take off last year's growth, which happens at these are the pruning wounds where we cut last year's shoots off. And so you can see here there's a drop of water that forms and will actually, it gets so big it just falls right off the plant and drips. So this is and that's super important to have the right amount of soil, of hydration in your soil at this point, because it needs all that water to wake up and rehydrate. And it's really important to start for the plant to be healthy for the rest of the season. Because the other thing that you need water for is, this is bud swell. So you can see the buds, which are just starting here and over here and right there. They haven't broken yet, but inside the buds, everything is developing. Last year, the buds developed for this year, and then as the buds break and everything pops out, this will have, it's actually really cool. It's like one of those old telescoping pointers. And inside, if you dissect a bud, if you cut it apart before they break open, you can see the baby clusters, you can see the leaves, you can see the shoots, you can see the tendrils, you can see the whole thing compressed down in. So what happens now, after the buds break open, is that pointer starts elongating and it starts growing back out again. And so from here on out, things will happen, and they'll happen quickly. And it's really fun to watch the vineyard wake up. So any thoughts, any questions on the vineyard right now? No questions? You guys are tame today. Come on, drink more.
I have one.
How you doing, Paul? What's up?
I'm doing good. What's Dad have to say about the bud breaking and, you know?
Oh, we don't let him talk. Dad, do you know? Here, let me unmute Dad. All right, now you can talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The different varietals will come into bud break at different times. Cabernet is always the last. And so we watch the Chardonnay and we watch the Syrah. And it's going to get to be 77 degrees in the later part of this week. And so we should have completely different pictures to show you next week, because this bud swell is it's getting ready. The typical day for bud break is April 6th. And so things are going to start rocking just in a matter of a couple of days. And so I expect the Chardonnay, even the Cab is beginning to do the bud swell. I'm kind of surprised. So, okay, is that good?
All right. So I noticed that Ed, as an aside, changed his background. He is
he's down at the tasting room.
He's down at the tasting room tasting. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And last week Adrish was at the winery, but this week he's just home, I guess. No place fun. We'll give you a few minutes. I'm sure you can fix that.
I'm working on it.
All right. So the wine starts. Ed, I'm going to ignore that comment. So we start in the vineyard we start the process by planting the grapes, and then we have to grow the grapes, and then we get to make the wine. And we've been talking about whites the last couple weeks. Reds are a little different. The process is, because you ferment with the skins on, everything in the vineyard is hand harvested, as with the others. It gets brought in, and we do the 1 ton small scale fermentations. Syrah spends, it gets cultured yeast. There's no native ferments in this one either. So Aaron, you should appreciate that. And then we spend 2 years in the barrel, no new oak with this, because we really want to present the fruit. We want to showcase our Syrah has those really nice floral elements. Even 2017 was a very nice. Drish is in the vineyard now. So the way that we present that fruit and floral presentation that our site gives is by making sure that we pick it while there's still that nice acidity and the fruit's bright. 17, like I was saying, is a warm year. So we get a lot of ripe fruit with that, but because we're on that rocky basalt promontory, it really keeps the pH low. It retains the acidity, which is super important, not only for the freshness and the fruit presentation, but it also means that these wines will age very well. And normally I wouldn't be drinking 17. I would be drinking something as old as I can find in my cellar, because these wines do age. And actually, when we were just logging on, Mom was like, should we do decanted this? And probably, but we'll just give it a swirl and watch it evolve over the course of the bottle. But well, there's Greg. Hi, Greg. So the combination of how you get those age-worthy wines that are fruit-driven, that have all that complexity, is the combination of, it's got the soil, it's got the grape growing that brings all those things out. We manage the canopy, we manage the water, we manage the crop load, we manage all these things to get nice ripe fruit, but not overly ripe, keep the acidity, have nice fruit presentation. We're gonna mute you.
Ed's bringing the train station down the road now.
And so then through the winemaking is how you get these wines that age really well. And Rhea, are you by yourself or do you have Aaron with you? I was
Right now I'm by myself.
Oh.
Aaron is on his way and should be here in the next 2 minutes.
All right, because in 2 minutes, maybe 3, we'll give him a minute to walk in the door. I wanted to ask him, for those of you who don't know who the puppy is, that's Milo, who is super adorable and cute. And Milo belongs to Rhiannon and Aaron, the wine director at Met Grill in Seattle. And I was going to have him talk about how kind of our Syrah in the context of the world of Syrah. So you guys are asking about timing, how long to decant. How long to decant the wines? A little bit depends on how proactive you are and how much you think ahead. Obviously, sometimes the right answer is like 2 minutes. Sometimes, especially with the older wines, June, you want to give them some time because they've been locked in that bottle for a little bit, and with some air, they really open up, they develop, and they show the fruit flavors and really pop if you give them some oxygen. If you're smart enough to plan ahead, which I rarely am, I'd give them an hour.
Or a couple, even a couple hours. We often just double decant them because we don't think that far ahead. So, which means you pour them from the bottle into a pitcher and pour them back, so you actually get 2 air exchanges, and that helps a lot.
Here's one.
If you're planning a nice meal, say Christmas or something, that you're Easter, that you're thinking ahead, I'll open these bottles 3-4 hours ahead. They're not going to go over the hill, believe me. They need some air, especially the younger ones, because like Carrie says, we make them to age, so they are tight. And even though they're delicious now, they're even better when you get a little air to them, or a little, quote, aging.
Mm-hmm. And the older they are, the less they really need that air. So the oxygen helps. I mean, there's a couple different components to aging. Oxygen is one. There's chemical processes that happen as well. So it's not a one-to-one analogy of, opening at this much time equals this many years of bottle age. But because oxidation is an important part of the aging process, the younger your wine is, the more you want to give it oxygen. The younger they are, the more they can take the oxygen and handle it. And you can, if they're a little older, they're a little more delicate, and you want to be a little more careful with your decanting. But I don't know that we have any wines that are that old that you really have to worry about it yet. I mean, I would worry give them another 10, 20 years, and then we'll start to think about the O2. But these wines really were meant to age, and so you can give them air, you can give them time to open up, but again, if you don't, double decant them, give them a swirl. You get a fair amount of oxygen this way, and it wakes them up. And it's kind of fun to watch the wines evolve and change. So just the beginning of the bottle or the beginning of the glass to swirl it around and see how it changes, the beginning of the bottle to the end of the bottle. If you put it in a decanter and swirl that decanter around, I mean, that's one of the fun things, is how does it evolve and change, and how quickly it changes. And
Why don't you talk a little bit, because you said that we don't use new oak in this, but talk the importance of oak. It's not just the impact of the oak flavor.
that is true. So oak,
What else it brings to the wine?
so one of the things that aging in oak barrels does versus aging in stainless steel with oak chips, because either way you get oak in the wine, but by aging in barrels you get oxygen. That it's a semi-permeable membrane, so you'll get oxygen coming in through the barrel over time, and it just microdoses the wines with oxygen. So it is part of the aging process, and there's a lot of complex chemistry that we don't really need to go into because it's not that exciting. But on how all the different reactions take place and how oxygen helps some of those, and then but too much is over the curve, and you want to manage the appropriate amount of oxygen. So all of our barrels have really tight grains in the wood to prevent too much oxygen from coming in. But different coopers have they'll have different rates they'll have different flavor components. You'll get different amounts of oxygen. So it's another thing to manage in the winemaking process. Ed wants to know how old these Syrah vines are. We planted the vineyard in 92, but there are a couple of blocks that are older. There's one block that's older, and there's a couple that are younger. These vines are actually 97.
Dad? No.
Wait, I have to unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
98.
All right.
Oh
98.
yeah, I guess I knew that.
So they were actually Riesling. So the Riesling that was on the property, which was planted in the 70s, extended down into that area, and we replaced it with Syrah, this part of it, in 98.
And Dad wanted to take out the rest of the Riesling, and Mom went, no.
Yep, I like
Which
Riesling.
is good, because we can't let Dad have his way all the time, or we wouldn't have any Riesling to drink.
Mm-mm.
And that would be bad.
Yep.
So the last time we changed any of the vines was 2001 or 2. 2 is the Baby Merlot. Because really the goal is to not, I mean, you can chase fads, you can chase trends, but every time you do that, you have to start over in the vineyard, and it takes a long time, and it takes a long time to get your vines mature. So if we have the right things planted in the right spots, it's really, the goal is to get the right varietal planted to the right spot and then just leave it and work with it, because it makes for better grapes, it makes for better wines. So we get most of our barrels, as Bill asked, all of our barrels come from France. There are different places to get oak. People do American oak, Hungarian oak, French oak are the main ones. American oak French oak is significantly more expensive, but it gives a much more, I liken it to a much more classy flavor. It's much more in line with the classic flavor profile that we're looking for. If you want to know what American barrels taste like, drink some bourbon. Because bourbon is aged in 100% new American oak every year. And so it's one of the reasons I don't love bourbon, is because I don't like, American oak and whiskey go fine together, but I'm so trained that I don't like it in wine. So therefore it correlates over to, I don't love it in beer or in spirits either. So I'll take my Scotch over my bourbon. It's just me. Looking at you, Gus. But all of our barrels come from France. And one of the reasons that we use a variety of different coopers is that the coopers are the people that make barrels, and each barrel has a different, each barrel has a different flavor component. So Seguin Morel bring in more vanilla, and Alain Fouquet brings in more base notes, and Cavins bring in more of that cocoa. And so if you only had one, you wouldn't have the complexity that you get from using all of the different spices in your spice cabinet. And so none of them are too much, but all of them in a little bit also help support your fruit, not overwhelm your fruit. And that way we're really presenting the grapes as opposed to the barrels, because anybody can buy barrels, and not everybody gets to work with Jabril Vineyard. So we might as well take advantage of the fact that we have Jabril Vineyard. So what other questions do you guys have at this point? Adrish, yes.
So you asked, so you made the comment about, you know, each cooperage has a different like flavor profile, right? And so then do you pair certain cooperages with certain wines, and or do you change what cooperage you use from year to year based on what the grapes are saying, and therefore what additional flavor profile notes a barrel can add?
Well, you can't change the coopers year to year based on the growing conditions very easily, because of the time that it takes to get them here. Normally I try to buy barrels in February, which is, I mean, we're talking about bud break now. So you're really, the planning cycle is longer than you just can't react quickly enough to say, ooh, this year I want a little more vanilla, so I'm going to use a few more of these coopers.
It's not like going to Walmart. You can't just pull them off the shelf.
You can do that a little bit more if you're a large winery, where you say, okay, I have this many different grape components, this many different barrel components, I'm going to mix and match. And then at the end of the day, in that philosophy, you might make your best wine more stylistically driven, but then the leftovers aren't as good. So it depends on if you're trying to optimize for one wine or if you're trying to optimize all the different parts of the vineyard. What we've found is that certain coopers work better with different parts of the vineyard. So Seguin Moreau, for example, works really, really well with the carriage house block. It's not as complementary to the fruit profile that comes out of the Coke blocks. So we get Seguin Moreau with a couple different toast levels, but all of those barrels go into carriage house. They toast the inside, because I saw your eyebrow go up, Adrish. They toast the inside of the barrels. You burn the inside of the barrels, and you can get different toast levels. So you can burn them a little bit, you can burn them more, you can medium plus, heavy toast. And just like when you put your toast in your toaster, the more you toast it, the more you go from bread to charred black toast. And so different winemakers have different preferences for where they want to be on that curve. Different cooperages, those things are a little different. The individual barrel makers, like depending on who's doing the actual toasting of the barrels, you'll get variation. So part of this,
in year to year, there's some variation too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, there are vintages where everybody just kind of toasted a lot, and there was other vintages where everything kind of toasts a little light. So it's one of the things that makes vintage variation fun, because it's not just the grapes, it's not just the fermentation, it's all of the things along the way that really, I mean, there's so many details that make it so fascinating when you get the farther into the rabbit hole you go. But so we order the barrels in February, we get them, they get delivered because we will take them early. We'll get them in about July, and which gives us time to get everything prepped and ready for harvest that starts depending on the year. In 17, this vintage, we actually were picking in August, but normally we don't start until the beginning of September. But it's easier to have everything set, to be planned ahead of time, to not be scrambling at the last minute, because there's enough moving pieces. The more we find, the more organized that we are, the more we've planned ahead, the more we've got everything set up and it runs smoothly. It enables us to make better decisions. It enables us to make better better decisions more logically. It gives you more time to think about the things that you really need to think about, and less time to think about, oh yeah, when are my barrels getting in because I need to put wine in them tomorrow. There's enough stress during harvest. We don't need any more. Who does the toasting? So the way they make the barrels is, I'll have to find some pictures for next week, but they take the staves, so they take the trees and they log them into straight boards the same way they do at Weyerhaeuser, and then or any of the mills, and they put them, they start them in a circle, and so they go around in a circle, and then they get them wet, and they start to bend them up because the barrels are shaped like this. So they start to bend them up and put hoops on them to keep them in place. And so they have, I forget the name of it, but they have a guy who, I mean, it's a very manual process. So you have a guy who puts a canister with flame on the bottom of them, and as it's burning, they get them wet, and they keep hydrating those staves, and they bend them and bend them and bend them until they're done. And then they will either lift up the fire tray, or they'll flip them over and burn the other side. And then they sometimes burn the heads, the ends of the barrels. A lot of times they don't bother, but for us, we have toasted barrels with toasted heads because we want the whole thing to be nice, have nice toasty oaky flavors, and you don't want any of that raw wood influence into the barrels. So it's and actually they season the wood, so it takes, most staves are 2 years. That just looked like a drish ran off into the vineyard. I love these backgrounds. They're so fun.
He's back.
Most of the time, it looks like they pick the trees, they cut the wood, they season the wood, and they dry it for 2 years before they make the barrels. So some of the barrels that we get are seasoned for 3. The staves are seasoned for 3 years. Some they're only seasoned for 2. But it's a really long, intricate, very artisanal process with the barrels and the in addition to the winemaking. So what we do then is we buy the new barrels. We bring them in about July, beginning of August, whenever they come in through the ports and get in here. This year will be fun because who knows what ports are going to be open when. But so we'll put the carriage house and the coat. The Chardonnay gets a little bit of new wood every year. The majority of it goes into the carriage house and the coat. For the Syrah, we use all second use. So after it's been a vintage in coat, then the Syrah goes into it. So the barrels that we used for the 17 Syrah we got them in 15, and they spent 15, 16, beginning of 17, end of 15, all of 16, beginning of 17, with coat or carriage house in the barrels, and then they get Syrah in them. Because the fruit is so different in Syrah, we don't want to overwhelm the fruit. We want to really showcase, but it's got that more delicate nose, that more delicate flavor, and it's not Cabernet. You don't want to make it like Cab. You don't want it to taste like Cab. So we use all second use. You get some oak influence by using it the second time, but not as much as you would with new oak.
Let's just see what Erin wants to say about the.
Yeah. Okay. Now that Erin's here.
Yeah.
Hello.
Good.
Erin, I was going to ask you to talk
Yes.
about how DeBrule, Cote Bonneville, Syrah, Washington Syrah, how do we fit into the world of Washington or into the world of Syrah?
That is a great question. Here's what I have to say about Syrah. Syrah, maybe more so than any red grape that I can think of, is a chameleon, right? It is very dependent on where it's growing, how it's growing, and then all the decisions that you're making in the winery. At work at the Metropolitan Grill, when I have someone ask me for Syrah, for a Washington Syrah, I generally ask them what they like to drink. And
I thought you said you totally want Cote Bonneville all the time, every table.
we actually sold our last 2 bottles our last night open, so I don't even have. I brought home something. I think you'll approve of my choice. I brought home. Does that show up? No, it doesn't work on the label. It's Jeff's. It's the W.T. Vintner's Destiny Ridge Gorgeous Syrah.
Which is totally apropos since Jeff is coming with us when we go to the Rhone next summer, and we're going to do our river cruise.
I have a bottle of 05 Rostang Cote Blonde, but I decided not to open that today because I feel like that actually probably has another 10 years before I want to open it. But it would be appropriate for your wine. So here's what I was getting at with Syrah. It can show a really wide variety of fruit nature. What you were talking about with oak is huge. It's a wine that can get overwhelmed. It's a grape that can get overwhelmed really quickly by oak. I think what is typical in the Australian version is, I describe it often as chocolate-covered cherries wrapped in bacon, because you're getting the smokiness from the Syrah and the fruit, but they, as a continent, typically use a lot of oak, and those oak notes of the chocolate and coffee just overwhelm the wine very quickly. I remember actually describing Northern Rhone Syrah and I didn't realize that it was Christophe at the time, but to Christophe Baron as sour cherries rolling around in a dirty ashtray. Right out of the Northern Rhone, the nature of the smoke that you get is much more almost acrid. It's less like bacon and ham hock, and it's more that old cigarette almost kind of smoke to it. And the nature of the fruit tends to be much more tart. Now in Washington, depending on where you're growing it and depending on the decisions that you make, you can sort of go to either side. Like, I love the sequel Syrah that Long Shadows puts out. It is highly oaked, and it is much more Australian in style. I love the Syrah that you do, the Syrah that Greg Harrington does, the Syrah that Jeff Lindsay Thorson does at W.T. Vintners, because it leans much more towards that old world style of, yes, there is fruit, but here's everything else that's also involved with it. Here's the licorice, here's the pepper, here's the smoke, here's the granitic minerality. And I very much appreciate the fact that you don't camouflage or homogenize those flavors with oak. And that the decisions that you make during the winemaking process, there's always beautiful, rich fruit in your Syrahs, but there's also that beautiful minerality balance, crushed granite. There's always the beautiful wispy smokiness to it. And I think that Washington Syrah gets to fill that really fun niche somewhere in between what is typical in the Northern Rhone Valley and what is typical in other New World appellations that produce Syrah. Is that a long-winded and boring explanation?
No, but I think actually I want to follow that up with, I want Co to talk for a minute, because we've got the one block, the one clone, and Co is now making, from Coden Cellars down the road, is making Syrah from 2 different vineyards in his vineyard designated wines that are, but they're different. Not only are they different sites, but they're different clones. And so, Co, if you want to talk a little bit about that, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I think Aaron has a great point, and a few great points. We see really a lot of variation vineyard to vineyard, even when we make wine. And so I would say that our styles of making the wine are very similar. The sites I tend to source from are probably a little more tannic than De Brule, and as such, I probably press a little earlier. But other than that, we're pretty similar. And I'm sourcing from the ridge top of Snipes Mountain, which is a really gravelly site, as well as Elephant Mountain, which is probably a little more analogous to DeBrule in that they're both along the Rosa, at a higher elevation, rattlesnake kind of ridge sites. And the way I'd characterize the Snipes Mountain site is a Phelps clone, which is the same clone of Syrah that you're using, Carrie, I believe. Is that right, Hugh? Nod. Yeah. So the classic clone that was brought in at Red Willow by the Sauer family back in the 80s, and then propagated. The one from Rattlesnake or from Elephant Mountain is what's called Tobless Creek clone, and it's a completely different animal. It ripens later. It's kind of different in a way, but I'd say typically the Snipes Mountain site is a higher pH, a little lower acid than DeBrule, and tends to be more tannic and not as fruit driven, a little more bacony perhaps. Whereas the Tobless Creek up at Elephant is just inky and lush and fruit driven, and it's a monster. I mean, it's a really big wine, but in many ways it has some similarities to the DeBrule in that it's fruit driven, and it's got the acidity and the pH are it's a little lower pH, higher acid, and in that way they're probably more similar. Is that what you're looking for, Carrie?
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, to Lori's question, that have we had I don't know that I've had the concrete Syrah from, I don't know how to say the name of the winery in Chelan. Carrie?
In Chelan.
Uh-huh.
They actually put it in a concrete egg, and it's different and it's good. I like it. I just didn't know if you'd had it. I'd recommend you try it. It's really interesting.
I've had some of their wines. We actually selected one that was from Yakima Valley Fruit. We were putting together a selection of wines for, I think
Masters.
I think it was the Masters of Wine, and we selected one of their wines. Although I don't think it was that one. I don't remember if it was a GSM or maybe you remember that wine, what exactly it was. But they've got some really interesting wines. So they do a nice job. We don't use concrete for a number of reasons. One of them is that concrete is impossible to clean. And because we're trying to make wines that are fruit focused, not microbiologically focused, over time, you get a lot of interesting things that go, you can get a lot of interesting things growing in concrete. You can have some problems with the concrete leaching into your wines, which some people call minerality, which I guess it could be because you have minerals actually leaching into the wines, but it can cause a lot of instability issues. It can cause a lot of technical problems over time. You have to maintain them. You really have to be very on top of how you're using your concrete and your sanitation and your maintenance and all of those things. And you do get different flavor profiles, but that's not something we've gone down that path, nor do I anticipate it. But the beauty of wine is that everybody gets to do something different, and we make the wines that we make, and then they make concrete wines that they make, and they can be great. And Betts makes wines a little differently. They're experimenting with some different things over there, and they put our fruit in them, so those are great, of course, because anything with DeBrule fruit's gonna be great. And so that's part of the fun of all of this. Natalie, you wanted to know about when we prune and how far back we prune. And so I think as a contrast, you guys can all see Adrish with his grapevines behind him. So that's the end of the season. And he's got those long shoots behind him with no leaves, which is a great indication. you can see the trunks and the cordons that go sideways, and then from that you get new shoot growth every year. So what we do is we prune back to we prune last year's shoots. So if you look at his and then look at this is last year's shoot right here. So this was 2 years ago, this was 3 years ago. Your most fruitful wood, where you're going to get the best crop and the best yields, are going to be off of this year's shoots that came off of last year's shoots. So we prune down last year's shoots every year. We come back to two buds. So we'll get one shoot that comes out of this one and one shoot that comes out of this
That's
one.
a bud. What's a bud and that's a bud? What's a shoot?
Yeah, we'll get one shoot.
I mean, it's just, those are buds. One shoot and two buds.
So we have one shoot from last year that will give us one shoot coming out of this bud and one shoot coming out of this bud.
Mhm.
So we'll have two shoots that come off of this position in the vineyard. And then we want the positions to be about 4 inches apart from one to the next. Because what that will give us is the right amount of canopy, which is the leaf surface area. So when you get into the growing season, oh, nice, Adrish. Well played. Or we can just look at Adrish's thing. That's about how far apart you want your shoots. It's about a hand. That gives you the right amount of shoots coming up, canopy of leaves. You want a certain amount of, you have to balance the amount of sunlight coming in on your clusters, because you want sunlight. It helps not only develop next year's buds, but it helps develop your fruit. It keeps those green flavors from that green pepper from getting into your Cabernet or being excessive in your Cabernet. And so you want a certain amount of sunlight. If you have too much sunlight, you get sunburn. You want airflow because it's good for disease protection. And so you're trying to balance all those things and really hit that moderate balance. And so 2 buds per spur is really it's about the right level, especially for our site. And so we prune in February, March. If it's a cold year, like last year when we had a lot of snow, we pruned a little later because we couldn't get into the vineyard. This year we were able to start pruning earlier. There are reasons to prune earlier or later depending on the season and what you're trying to accomplish with delaying growth or anticipating growth in a certain block. But
Usually February.
Yeah, usually February, March is a good.
Good. Would it be too late to prune now? Had 4 grapevines and now I have 2. and I just want to know, is it too late to prune now? It's April. I was like,
have they budded out?
No.
Then you're not too late.
Okay. I just didn't want them to bleed out because they really did.
Oh, that's okay. That's good. That's healthy. It's normal.
Okay. Thank you.
The earlier, at this point, the later you prune, the later you're going to push your season. So at this point, you should go out and prune them.
Okay, gotta go.
Okay.
Right now. Have another glass of wine, then go. Then do it tomorrow.
I'm drinking bourbon. Sorry.
Oh, well, apparently it's just me. You know, some people like.
Kara, I think your dad
too.
wanted to say something.
Huh?
I think he wanted to say something.
I will listen to him.
Oh boy. Hold on, I have to unmute him. I don't know that he knows how to unmute himself. Go ahead, Dad.
If you prune in February, you're going to be fine. It's not too late. You're doing exactly what Carrie said. Get it done. You don't have to go out right now. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, is it tomorrow? Okay. I waited this.
Get out there.
I've done it every 8 years, and 8 years ago I lost 2 of them because I did it at the wrong time, I guess. So I have 2 left. I'd like to keep them. You know, not that I'm gonna do anything with them, but I want grapes. That'd be great. So.
Yeah, they taste good.
Yeah.
Right.
You can eat them.
Yeah. Well, if you prune them, so basically tune in every week. We'll tell you what's going on. We'll tell you what to do. And then by the time we get to the end of this whole thing, then you can lead one of these and we'll have to get a bottle
Right.
and we'll do a tasting. It'll be super fun.
Oh, she's a funny girl. Anyway.
Other question we had was on cleaning. I commented on cleaning the concrete. How do we clean barrels? So one of the things that we do with barrel aging is, because we don't fine or filter our wines, all of the clarification happens in the barrel. So if you look at the glass of wine, it's very, yeah, hold on. That has to happen too. It's, even though it's dark, if you look through the rim of the glass, there's a lot of clarity. If you shine a flashlight through here, these wines are really clean and there's not a lot of suspended solids. There's not a lot of stuff in them. Right after fermentation, you put them in the press and you basically squeeze all of the juice away from the bulk of the seeds and the skins, but you get a lot of solids in there. So on average, every 3 months-ish, depending on the vintage, we'll go through and rack the wines, which is you get solids down at the bottom and they settle down, and you take the clean wine off the top, and then then we take the barrels and we flip them over, capture the rest of the lees. But then we clean the barrels out at those points, we just clean them out with water, because then the same wine's going right back in. But in between, after we bottle, before we put wine back into them, we'll clean them with water, with pressure, to make sure any tartrates have come out. We make sure we get right all the way down to that wood surface. And then we come through with ozone and make sure that anything that's living in there gets whacked with ozone. And because they'll sit empty for a couple of months, then we burn sulfur dioxide discs into the air, the headspace, to make sure that it's the environment for any microbial growth is really inhospitable. So it's not like there are no spoilage organisms or bad bugs that could be floating in the air. We just don't want them. We don't want them to thrive. We don't want to hang the welcome sign like, hey, come on in. So what you want to do, and just like we're talking right now, here's your bubble. Everybody's talking about keep your bubble of your house and keep coronavirus outside. Every barrel has it gets cleaned, and then it gets SO2, and then we put a little Dixie cup in it to keep that sulfur dioxide gas in the barrel instead of in the air. And that's kind of that barrier of keep the bad bugs out, and we'll try to keep only the good bugs inside, because we have the barrels have a lot of bugs in them. They've got the yeast, they've got the malolactic bacteria that we inoculate with. So the goal is to keep good bugs in, bad bugs out. That makes sense?
Talk about your testing.
Oh yeah, we do. Have to worry about bottles getting COVID. No, we don't. There's nothing pathogenic that lives in wine, and by the time it gets to you, there's no delivery. Wine deliveries are not where you're going to get sick right now. And wine's antiviral. It's fruit, which is healthy. It's nothing bad can live in wine, so you're pretty safe drinking wine. It's
Cleans you from the inside.
cleans you from the inside. Between the alcohol and the low pH, it's really good for you. It's not antiseptic. Don't use it to wash your hands. That's what soap is for, but use it to keep your insides clean.
The DNA.
So, oh yeah, DNA testing. So the other thing that people are, I think, getting a greater appreciation for currently is with all of how are we testing for coronavirus? There's a lot of PCR testing, and how do we figure out that it's that virus, and how do you test for it? We do all of the same kind of testing. We'll go down to the lees in the bottom, the solid materials in the wine that's down in the bottom of the barrels, because we collect those when we're racking, and we keep all that wine from the bottom. We actually send that into the lab and do the same sort of PCR testing to make sure that we don't have spoilage organisms, that we don't have any of those bad things. So just like you can test as to whether or not you have corona, we test whether or not, do we have Brett, do we have Pediococcus, do you have lacto, do you have excessive acetobacter, do you have all of the things that can make wines taste bad. The beauty of all of those things is that even though probably the worst, scariest name of them all is Schizosaccharomyces. It won't make you schizophrenic. It just doesn't taste that great. And so nothing in alcohol and nothing in wine will hurt you. But we do all of that advanced molecular testing just to make sure that the quality is at the point that we want it to be. And also it means that we can bottle these wines unfined and unfiltered, because if they don't have any Brett going into the bottle, you know that Brett won't be expressing itself and growing and metabolizing over time. And some wineries think that a little bit of Brett is a good thing. And so I've heard of places that will have a tank that has wine with a lot of Brettanomyces, and they'll put just enough of that into the rest of the blend. They get the flavor profile where they want it, and then they filter it all out. Because it's not the yeast itself that you're tasting, it's those metabolites. So if there's no yeast, it can't be metabolizing. That's pretty risky. That's not our philosophy. Mom doesn't like Brett, so we don't have it. We don't let that one in. But that's kind of the microbiology of that. We spend a lot of time worrying about microbiology, about risk, about how does it spread from one point to another. So I just have to say it's a whole lot more fun thinking about it in wine than thinking about it with people and health, which is why I didn't go to medical school in the first place. Let's see what other. We're going to have to do a Scotch tasting, apparently, when we're done with all the we're done with all the wines. Since I looked back over the chat and there's 16 comments on Scotch.
But hey, what's wrong with that?
Nothing. Nothing. Oh, Paul, your question about the virus living on surfaces. So it can live on surfaces, but the studies have been done. Those numbers are. It either lives on very high touch surfaces like doorknobs that get touched over and over and over again, so they get re-inoculated. The data that I've read shows that in a lab environment, which is perfect conditions and unchanging, the virus can live for a day for 24 hours on cardboard and up to 3 days on plastic or metals, less than that on copper, because copper and silver are antimicrobial. But those are pristine lab conditions. And I think that if you're in an area that has more temperature changes as we're going into when it's warmer, as we're going into, if you're here in the Yakima Valley where it's really dry, those aren't ideal conditions. So anytime you have less than ideal conditions, the viability of the virus is going to be reduced. I am definitely not an expert enough to say it's a 0% chance. But in terms of mitigating risk, which is what you're trying to do with all this stuff, I'm personally not too worried about it, but again, I'm not a virologist. But I think if you're super worried, take the box, bring it inside, wash your hands, unload it the next day. And you'll be fine. But I know, have enough of a cellar that you can wait one more day for your wine delivery. So that's good planning. That's not hoarding. That's good planning. So, all right. Hey, we should talk about the food. Since and I know Becky made the food, which is awesome. So, what do you guys think of meatballs? We had a bunch of people who made the meatballs, right? And did you guys make the sauce that goes with it? Anybody? Oh, God, nice. Adrish, what did you make? You sent a picture of something delicious looking.
Delicious looking is the right phrase. I made like a rosemary and garlic lamb shoulder. I have to say this is my first time trying this recipe, and it turned out to be a little bit more dry than I would have liked. But the good news is I have another lamb shoulder to try again But you know, as always, like lamb went really well with the Syrah.
Excellent.
Well, lamb and Syrah go delicious together. So, you know, when you're thinking of appetizers, lamb meatballs comes to my mind. There's a million ways to do them, obviously, because we're kind of sequestered. I've never made this recipe, but it looked like I had all the ingredients, so that was the first point. But and I thought I'm going to experiment too. So I think it's pretty good. I mean,
I like it.
got a little spice to it. Lamb's always, like I said, the feta. I think goes nicely.
And the cumin and the cayenne. It's
Nice cucumber is freshening on the sauce.
yeah.
So I don't know. But like I said, there's lots of ways to do it. If anybody else has another favorite recipe, feel free to share.
Yeah, Ree, what do you think? You don't eat lamb.
I don't eat lamb.
Yeah. So are you snacking? What's your favorite pairing with Syrah?
My mouth.
Fair. Fair.
I'm trying to think what I would put. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe let Erin make you something?
Portobello, like a
Portobello mushroom.
portobello mushroom kind of,
Yeah, that'd be good.
as opposed to a light portobello mushroom, you know.
It also works with the desserts if you have like a blueberry type dessert or even chocolate that has fruit in it is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So oftentimes when we do winemaker dinners, we'll use Syrah for the dessert pairing.
Yeah, and red wine and chocolate can be challenging, but because the tannin, and especially if you have dark chocolate, they can compete a little bit. But Syrah is a lower tannin varietal, so if you want to do that, the red wine and chocolate pairing, go for something like you want to go for something like Syrah that's got a little bit lower tannin, so that way it won't compete with the chocolate for sure. But I think the cheese ideas that you guys are talking about. So unfortunately, well, we had talked about, but didn't think it was fair, doing pairing the cheese, the Ferndale Farmstead, the Daniel's Artisan cheese, because there's the
You like that, Tony?
because we've got the cheese that they make with the washed with the rind of our Syrah, and it won again another medal or got nominated for the Good Food Awards, and there's only a couple of them every year that get nominated from Washington, and that's been nominated twice. And so Daniel's won a lot of awards with that cheese, which is really fun. It's fun to be.
It's delicious.
It's delicious, and it's a good hookup for. He's like, I need more Syrah. I'm like, I need more cheese. So it's a good partnership.
I think Tony's had it once to see what he wants to say about it. Unmute him.
Here we go. Yeah, Tony, what do you?
You had the Ferndale Farmstead?
I have. I've had most of their cheeses, and like they're right beside the wine cellar where I get all the U.S. wine shipped. So it's kind of like I pick up a couple cases of wine from my cellar and some cheese from them, and they do such a great job. They have a good tasting room. I have not had a bad piece of cheese or variety of cheese that they make.
So you had the washed one with the Syrah?
Yeah, yes, I have, and it's absolutely delicious. And I don't know if most people know, but he comes from a big cheese making family out in Wisconsin, and so when they moved here, even the grass that they grow and the fertilizer they use, like everything is methodical, just like you do, Carrie, with the toasting of the barrels and different barrels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very high level stuff.
Yeah.
Bill wants to know if we can make some meatballs. You know what we are gonna do? As soon as this whole thing is over, hopefully we can do our progressive dinner in July, and we'll have the guys from Ferndale, from Daniel be here. We do the cheese course. We could throw in some meatballs. We'll have everything out if we can actually pull that. God, I'm hoping we can pull that off in July.
Scott wants to know if we have any bottles of our initial vintage, and that was 2005. Sadly, we don't.
I have one in my cellar, and every time I look at it, I'm like, no, I can't open that.
Yeah.
But it was.
So I have to tell you a little story about that.
So we're done.
Because that was when we made Syrah in 2005. We had kind of a little. It was a good year for Syrah. We had some extra, so we thought, well, we haven't played around with this variety, so let's make some Syrah. So we made the Syrah, and Carrie was off getting, her education at Davis and gallivanting around the world, and she went to she came back from Australia. We'd been up at the vineyard, and then we were sitting on the deck, and she said, we said we'll have a bottle of wine. So I said, let's have some Syrah. So I went and got the Syrah, and she goes, Mother,
I did not.
do you know how good this is?
Okay, yeah, I did.
I said, well, I think so. Yeah. She says, no, I don't think you do. And she says, I've just been all over Australia tasting nothing but the best of the best that they don't even open for people who aren't winemakers. And this is as good as anything coming out of Australia.
And I stand by that statement.
And she said, when I come back, we're making Syrah. And I said, okay. Because at that point, our Syrah was all contracted. And I said, well, that's going to be interesting because somebody has to leave. We don't usually kick people out of the vineyard. But when did you start it again? 10?
10.
Anyways, in 2010, we had the opportunity to get some Syrah back. So now we make Syrah every year.
So I was right.
Yeah. And then I was wrong, apparently. Or maybe not so much. I'm not sure.
But it is, I mean, there's a lot of, it's in many ways, it's one of the wines that's harder for me to talk about because it's like, why is it so different? What makes our Syrah unique? And I'm like, because it's just really good. Do I need to say anything else? Like, it's just delicious. Then I had to think about it and I came up with some words and whatever, but I still go back to, I really, Syrah doesn't always get the love and attention that I think the grape deserves. But this style is just, it's really good. So we have, but if you're looking for older bottles of Syrah, we have, did we sell all the 12? We might have like a bottle or 3 of the 12 left because we found some a week ago or a couple of weeks ago.
We might have a little bit.
I think we may have a bottle or 2 left, but we do have some 13. So we can go back to the 13. So if you're interested in the older bottles, only the newest one is on the website, but since this is
the company.
Yeah, we're sales, we're marketing, we're fulfillment, we're packing your orders. And lately, if you're in Yakima, we're the delivery people. So if you come pick up your wine, we're the curbside pickup. So if there's something you want, just,
call us.
Just call us and ask.
Yeah. So do you have any Australian Syrahs you like?
Oh, do I have any Australian Syrah I like? We should let Adrish talk about that because he spent more time there more recently than I have. Go ahead.
I don't know that I know enough to say anything about this, but I am partial. I went to a thing once with somebody who really liked Rockford, and we did a vertical tasting. This was in 2017, and we did a vertical tasting of 2012, 11, 10, and 9. And that was just educational for me. Aside from the fact that the Rockford Basket Press is an awesome wine, it was educational because you could tell that the 2012 just wasn't ready, and the older you went, the better the wine was.
Aaron, do you have any favorites?
Yeah, I always try and judge wines for what is typical for the region, but a couple of the ones that absolutely stand out for me, the Torbreck, the wines that Torbreck makes, The Run Rig Shiraz is always fantastic. And again, it's one of those that's, my issue with Australian Shiraz is that typically it can be a very simple wine. Not that there's nothing wrong with simplicity. However, Syrah being a grape that can bring out so much character and so much complexity, Run Rig is one of those wines that always shows a lot. Obviously, if someone wants to open up a bottle of Grange for me, I'm not going to turn that down. You know, we sell so little Australian wine at the Metropolitan Grill. I purposefully taste less and less every year because there's just not a point. If I have the opportunity to taste X amount of wines, I'd rather be tasting Washington Syrah over Australian stuff. I'd rather be tasting French Syrah over Aussie stuff. So that's sort of what I concentrate on. But the Run Rig, when you said that basket press that's an amazing wine. It's an astounding wine. Yeah.
About,
I agree with the Yalumba. That's a good one. And Henschke's great. Henschke used to have no, I'm thinking of somebody else. Henschke's great. Henschke's really cool. Henschke gets an added point of awesomeness because I showed up to their tasting room with my backpack looking like a bedraggled backpacker at 4:45, and they stayed open and let me taste everything and took great care of me. And they're like, we're not gonna open Hill of Grace for you, but we'll let you taste through everything else. And they sold wine in splits. And when you're backpacking by yourself in the winter, in the middle of nowhere, it's hard to drink full bottles of wine every night. So they get extra cool, just points for being awesome people. And I like to drink great wine from great people. So Henschke's on my list.
Nice.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Call Dan. See if he's up.
So Dan, what you've had a lot of Australian wines. You're unmuted. All right. No worries. No worries. I think to Erin's point, because Australia is a really warm climate, whenever you push the envelope of ripeness and add a lot of oak, you do lose a lot of the complexity that you get from cooler regions, and you lose a lot of the complexity that you get from more restrained winemaking. That being said, wineries that have what in Australia counts for old vines, which are 60 to 100 years old, those are really interesting wines with a lot of complexity that tend to have good winemaking. So, you know, in another 60 years, then I can't wait to see what our vines taste like, because it's really interesting when the vines get that old. So, hi Lynn, how are you? Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we have people joining us for a happy hour after dinner. So
That's okay.
Cheers to you East Coast guys. Love that.
Give her an unmute and see how
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, do you have I know you just got here, but do you have anything to?
I think this is so cool. I miss you guys so much, and I wish I could come out to Washington State and see you. And so it's really neat that I could join in. Like, it's just fantastic. I love that you're doing this. Love it so much.
You probably want to have us on like Fox Business or something.
I do.
Talk about that.
To see where we've come.
I do. Yes. I think there's a lot of angles. I think more than once, actually.
So my first time on television, I was not media trained. I didn't know anything.
True.
I knew nothing. I
True.
was like Fox Business.
But you were good. You were very good.
Apparently. It helps to have good wine. That's all I'm going to say.
You were a natural. Everyone, we've known each other a long time. Sorry to jump in here and hijack.
Oh, it's just what happened.
Thank you for unmuting me.
So you know what we should do? What we should have done with the since you guys are all talking about Molly Duker, Sparky Marquis, we should have gotten him on this call because he's one of my drinking buddies.
Probably 3 a.m. or something. But
It doesn't matter.
That's true.
It
He's
doesn't
probably
matter.
Still up.
He
No, it's perfect. It's like lunchtime for him. So
well,
he should be
let's help
drinking.
him, for God's sakes.
so okay, so next week is Carriage House. So what are we gonna eat? What do you guys think for apps? What do you think for snacks? What kind of comments do we have for Carriage House? What are your food and wine pairings for Carriage House? I know I'm shifting gears here. Getting a lot of blank stares. Because
Nice
you know mom's gonna get
vegan
mad
burger.
if I make her do it.
What do you want?
So a nice vegan burger.
A vegan burger. Okay.
Wait, didn't we establish like whatever, like chicken curry?
We could do chicken curry. That is true. Adrish opened our eyes to the fact that Indian food and Carriage House is
Oh yeah, that was
perfect
phenomenal.
pairing.
We did. What's that thing we made? Dad is actually the Indian cook now, with Adrish's tutorage, and he made that spinach. What do you call it, Adrish? Help me out here.
Saag paneer.
Saag paneer with the chicken curry. It was really good. But that's not really an appetizer. That's kind of dinner. We're kind of sticking to apps, but
It's dinner for it's. I'm on the East Coast. It's dinner time for me.
yeah, you and Lynn can have that. So you need to send the recipe to Lynn, and probably Dan. You're kind of in that little, almost to that time zone, and then we here on the West Coast to have to catch up with you.
Yeah. Actually, Erin, you should send something vegetarian though to that point for
Well,
everybody who's not free.
I actually
basically.
was going to do vegetarian tomorrow, next week.
Okay.
So-
Well, ideas
Yeah.
are welcome. Input is
Yeah.
welcome. Because Mom was not thrilled when I said she had to come up with a recipe every week. So
No. It's when she changed it and said you have to come up with it before the weekend. I
Mhm.
said, oh, okay. So yeah, we can do that.
yeah. So
But yeah, we welcome anybody's suggestions because, like you say, it's just it's meant to be fun. And figure it out. But that tonight I am making a chicken ziti marsala. That's not right. Tiki marsala. Adrish, help me out here.
Tikka masala, that works.
Yeah, tikka masala. That's it. Yeah, that's what I'm doing tonight. That would be good with Carriage House. I'm glad you remembered to tune me in on that. Because those warm Indian spices in Carriage House are really, really good. The cardamoms, the cumins, corianders, those kinds of spices in Carriage House are great pairings. So.
all right. Well, any other thoughts on Syrah before we let you guys go drink the rest of / open another bottle?
So what about we didn't say anything?
Oh yeah. Mike, do you want to say something?
Mike, spotlight's on you.
Hello. Oh.
He was commenting on the fact that it said we needed a nice cheddar cheese, and it's like we've been eating Cougar Gold.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Works really well with the Syrah.
Or the Dairy Gold, the new Dairy Gold white cheddar is delicious.
Oh,
Local, Sunnyside.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
All right, guys.
That's
Well,
the Cougar Gold in the fridge, and it was just time to eat it.
you know, I think it's the right time to eat the things you want to eat and drink the things you want to drink.
And if you have them in the house and you can't go out, that's pretty much perfect.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
It's the way it works right now.
Yep.
All
So
right.
how about Cindy?
All right. Thank you very much.
This has been fun.
All right. Well, we will see you guys all next week.
Yeah. Thanks
And,
everybody for showing up.
Be healthy.
Yes, everybody stay healthy, and we will see you next week and the week after and back in person when we all get to do that again. So
Amen.
thanks for
What time for dinner?
I got it marinating. I got to go finish it up.
It's a 3-hour drive.
We're 15 minutes away.
So
Are you coming, Paul? I'll put it off. You might want to let me do it once or twice before I start serving at the company.
I can't go into the state of Washington right now.
Oh yeah, we don't let those Oregoners in over the border.
well, you know, the good thing is they probably sanitize everything when it crosses the border, so we can ship you wine probably complete, and you don't have to worry at all.
Perfect.
So, there you go. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Yep.
Good night.
Cheers.
We'll see you next week.
You will.
All right. Bye.